All right, let's go ahead and get started with Chapter 4 in Unit 6. We're going to be purchasing a home in this chapter. For our objectives today, I will estimate closing costs. I will create an amortization table for a fixed rate mortgage, and I'll create an amortization table for a fixed rate mortgage with extra payments, and I'll investigate the amortization table with an adjustable rate mortgage. So let's get started on these. Right here you'll see the vocabulary for the unit. Make sure that you've reviewed that from the textbook before watching this video. Okay, let's look at example 1. It says Leah and Josh are trying to buy a $600,000 home. They've been approved for 7.25% APR, and they made a 15% down payment. They're going to be closing on September 6th. So how much should they expect to pay in prepaid interest at closing? So the first thing that we have to do is we have to find the down payment, and then we're going to subtract that from the purchase of the home, because the interest is only on the amount of the loan, not on the purchase of the home. So looking at this, finding the annual payment, we've got, or the down payment, we've got $600,000. And we're going to multiply that by 0.15. We got that because it was 15% down, and then dividing by the 100, we get 0.15 as a decimal, and we find that that is $90,000. So now if we take the $600,000 and we subtract that down payment of $90,000, we find that the loan amount is going to be $510,000. Now that we've found that loan payment amount, or that loan amount, let's go to next step, which is going to be finding your annual interest. And really, for purposes here, I'm only interested in that first year. It's a very simple equation. I'm going to take the loan amount, which was the $510,000, and I'm going to multiply it by the interest rate as a decimal, so 0.0725. When I multiply that, I get $36,975 in annual interest. Next step, I need to find the daily interest. And that's very easy once we've found the annual interest and if we know how many days are in a year. So we're going to take $36,975. We're going to divide that by 365. We always assume it is a non-leap year unless it tells us that it is a leap year. So we find that interest in one day is $101.30. And that's per day. Next, we need to find out for how many days will they be paying interest. Well, they're not going to pay interest on the 1st through the 6th because they didn't own the home. So the period of time that they're going to be paying interest is from September 7th through the 30th. So to find out how many days that is, we're going to take 30 minus 6, which is the actual closing day, and we're going to have 24 days that we are paying interest on. Our final step is to take that 24, multiply it by the daily interest of $101.30, and we find that at closing, we need $2,431.20 just in prepaid interest. Now, there are other closing costs that come into account, but that's the only one with regards to interest. All right, please press pause, solve the check your understanding, and when you're ready, come back and we'll solve it together. All right, so let's take a look at it. Let's go through the steps. How much will we be charged in prepaid interest? Well, breaking it down, it was a $400,000 loan at 6% interest. So if we multiply those two together, we end up with about $24,000. And then once we take that and we divide that by the 365, we get that it's $65.75 in interest for our daily interest. Our next step, we're closing on December 17th. There's 31 days in December, so recognize here that it's very important to know how many days are in each of the given months that these scenarios are given in. For December, there's 31 days, so 31 minus 17, because we're closing on the 17th, is 14. Our last step is to take the 14 days and multiply it by the 65.75, and we find that the closing interest for prepaid interest is $920.50. All right, example 2, Leah and Josh know that they will have to bring their checkbook to closing. What might they have to expect to pay at closing? So before we can answer this question, we need to go over some things. You probably read this already in the pre-reading, but I'm going to review it again. Closing costs in general are 2 to 7% of the purchase price of the home. Now, it's really important that you identify here with the purchase price, not the mortgage price. So if we look back in example 1, the purchase price was the $600,000. And so all we need to do here, because we know that it's going to be 2 to 7%, we're going to take that $600,000 and we're going to multiply it by 0.02, and we're going to multiply it by 0.07. When we multiply it by 0.02, we get $12,000. By 0.07, we get $42,000. Now it's looking for a range, which means you're going to have a low end and a high end. You're not going to do any subtraction from here. You're just going to show it to me from low end. So on the low end, they're going to owe $12,000 on the closing day. High end, they need to make sure they have as much as $42,000 for their closing. And that's my answer. Go ahead and press pause, solve this, check your understanding, come back when you're ready. All right, Shannon had to make a down payment of 15% of the selling price of her home. She was approved for a $340,000 mortgage. What range of cost might she expect to pay at closing? So we've already been through that it's 2 to 7%, but the key thing that I tried to hone in on is of the purchase price. And if you look at it here, do we have the purchase price? And the answer to that would be no. We have the loan amount and we have the down payment amount. So we need to use what we have to try and solve for the information that we need. Well, if 100% of the loan, or if 100% of the house purchase amount is that given amount, but I know that the down payment was 15%, then I know that this mortgage represents 85% of the purchase price. So if I take 0.85, that's 85% as a decimal, and I say that times whatever the purchase price is, I know that I will get a value of $340,000. So then I divide both sides by my 0.85, and I find that the amount of the loan, or the amount of the purchase price for this particular home, is $400,000. And so now I'm going to take that $400,000 and I'm going to multiply it by 0.02. And I'm going to take the $400,000 and multiply it by 0.07. And my closing costs are going to range anywhere from $8,000 to $28,000. So how you would see it on a quiz or a test if you were being asked, $8,000 to $28,000 is what it would look like. All right, example 3. Trudy and Tom have been approved for $300,000 15-year mortgage at an APR of 5.75. How much of their first monthly payment is going to go to interest? So I'm going to introduce a new formula here, but the first thing that we do need to do is let's identify, because it wants to know interest and it wants to know principal. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get the monthly payment. We know it's $300,000 at 0.0575, and we're looking at a mortgage of 15 years. So the monthly payment, which I'll identify here as MP, is going to be $2,491.23 when I plug that into the calculator. So now let's look at this new formula. It is identifying the interest for a given payment. And it's I for interest equals the principal, and I'll put an X there for my times, the rate divided by 1,200. Now, the key thing that I want you to understand here is that this rate, let me change colors, is not as a decimal. We go ahead and keep it in its regular form. And that's new. That's different than what we've been doing throughout the whole class. So I want to point out that that is different. So let's identify here the interest. It's I equals the principal, which is $300,000, times, I'll put a little dot there, 5.75 divided by 1,200. And when I go ahead and do that in the calculator, I find that the interest equals $1,437.50. But now it's also asking for the principal. So remember, the monthly payment here is giving me the principal payment plus the interest payment. So if I subtract the interest out, I'll get just the principal. So it's $2,491.23 minus the $1,437.50 is going to give me a principal payment of $1,053.73. And those are my two answers. There is principal, there is interest. And if I subtract that from the $300,000, then I can go through and do the process all over again with my new principal balance. So what percentage of the monthly payment went to principal and what percentage went to interest? So remember, when we're looking at a percentage of, again, we're looking at a ratio of part over whole. So with the interest, it was $1,437.50 divided by the whole payment, which is the $2,491.23. For the principal, it was the $1,053.73 divided by the $2,491.23. When I plug each of those into the calculator, I find 57.7% went to interest. So I actually got an answer of 0.577, moved it over, and that's what I got. Principal, when I divided that, it was 42.3%. So when I got that, it was 0.423, moved it over twice and got 42.3% for my principal. And here are my answers. All right, so the next question, really there isn't a whole lot of calculation to be done. It's how can Trudy and Tom get an accounting of where their monthly payments will go for their first year of mortgage? And that is what's called an amortization table. And what I'd like for you to do is take just a few moments, make sure that you are familiar with what an amortization table is and how to work through it. As far as the rest of the examples that you see in your notes, we're actually not going to do, because it's looking for it more in a spreadsheet, and we're not going to focus as much on the spreadsheet as we are on the process of how to find the principal and the interest. And that we've already done through the first 4 examples. So good job, everyone, and let's move on to the next one.